Well, they're saying obesity is a problem, kids are drinking soda, let's tax it. Okay? So they're talking about soda like it's empty calories. I'm here to tell you that it goes way beyond empty calories. Okay? The reason why this is a problem is because fructose is a poison. Okay? It's not about the calories. Has nothing to do with the calories. It's a poison by itself. So here's the secular trend in fructose consumption over the past 100 years. Before we had food processing, we used to get our fructose from fruits and vegetables. And if we did that, today we would consume about 15 grams per day of fructose. Not sugar, fructose. So sugar would be 30 grams, it would be double. Okay? We're just talking about fructose today. Okay? Prior to World War II, okay, before it got rationed again, okay, we were up to about 16 to 24, about 20 grams. So a small increase from the beginning of the century to World War II. Then, in 1977, just as high fructose corn syrup was hitting the market, we had increased that. We had basically doubled up to 37 grams per day, or 8% of total caloric intake. By 1994, we were up to 55 grams of the stuff per day. Remember, if you want to do sugar, then double the number. So that's 10.2. So you can see that more and more of our caloric intake, higher percentage, is being accounted for by sugar every single year. So it's not just that we're eating more. We're eating more sugar. Okay? And for adolescents today, we're up to almost 75 grams, 12% of total caloric intake. 25% of the adolescents today consume at least 15% of their calories from fructose alone. This is a disaster, an absolute unmitigated disaster. The fat's going down, the sugar is going up, and we're all getting sick. When you look at the difference in price between sugar and high fructose corn syrup, you can see that high fructose corn syrup is about half the price. Okay? So in other words, it's cheap. So high fructose corn syrup is evil, but it's not evil because it's metabolically evil. It's evil because it's economically evil. Because it's so cheap that it's found its way into everything. It's found its way into hamburger buns, pretzels, barbecue sauce, and ketchup. Okay? Almost everything. Okay? Somebody emailed me the other day and told me they went into their local grocery store and went through every single loaf of bread on the shelf. And out of 32 types of bread on the shelf, only one of them did not have high fructose corn syrup in it. Okay? So we are being poisoned by this stuff, and it's been added surreptitiously to all of our food. Every processed food. Juice is missing, because juice is sucrose, right? Sugar. And juice causes obesity. Okay? So this is a study done by Miles Faith, a prospective study in inner-city Harlem toddlers. Okay? And the number of juice servings per day predicts the change in BMI score per month in these inner-city Harlem toddlers. Now, where do these inner-city Harlem toddlers get their juice? From what? From where? From whom? From WIC. Anybody heard of WIC? You know what WIC is? Women, Infants, Children, right? A government entitlement program set up under who? Nixon, okay, to prevent failure to thrive. They did. This is the equal and opposite reaction. So let's add juice in. Here it is. And so most fructose items, when you put it together, now we're up to 113 pounds on this graph. And I just heard from Brian Williams of NBC News after the most recent study came out that was in the Journal of Clinical Investigation that we are actually up to 141 pounds of sugar per year, each of us. That's what we're up to, 141 pounds of sugar per year. Okay? Now, do you think that this might have some detrimental effects on you? Hasn't stopped you, has it? That's the point. It hasn't stopped. What did we do in 1982? What did we do? We went on a high-carb diet, which was supposed to be a low-fat diet, right? Right. So, here's the low-fat craze, okay? Took America and the world by storm. Because the content of low-fat, home-cooked food that you cook by yourself in your house, you can control the content of fat. Okay? But when you process it, low-fat processed food, It tastes like cardboard. It tastes like crap. Okay? So the food companies knew that. So what did they do? They had to make it palatable. So how do you make it something palatable that has no fat in it? You add the sugar, right? So everybody remember Snackwells? Okay, so 2 grams of fat down, 13 grams of carbohydrate up, 4 of them being sugars so that it was palatable. Okay? Well, we've just shown you that that's the worst thing you could do. And that's what we've done. And we're still doing it today. So when you find a mistake, what do? Okay? You admit the mistake and you right the ship. We haven't admitted the mistake and we haven't righted the ship. So we've had our food supply adulterated, contaminated, poisoned, tainted, okay, on purpose. And we've allowed it, and we've let it, through the addition of fructose for palatability, especially because of the decreased fat, and also as a ostensibly browning agent, which actually has its own, okay, and removal of fiber also. Now, why did we remove fiber from our diet? We as human beings walking the earth 50,000 years ago used to consume 100 to 300 grams of fiber per day. We now consume 12. Why? What did we do? We took the fiber out. So why did we take the fiber out? Well, it takes too long to cook, takes too long to eat, and shelf life. Okay? So people ask me, what's the definition of fast food? Fiberless food. Okay? I dare you, other than a salad, I dare you to go to any fast food restaurant and find anything on their menu that they actually have to cook that has more than 1 gram of fiber in it. Because there isn't any. And that's on purpose. Because they take the fiber out, because that way they can freeze it, ship it around the world, and cook it up fast. And not only is it fast cooking, but it's fast eaten, which also causes its own satiety issues. Bottom line, we have a typhoon on our hands. Okay? And then finally, the last issue was the substitution of trans fats, which are clearly a disaster. But those have been going down because we know that those are a problem. So we've gotten rid of most trans fats. Not completely, but most. Okay? So this is it. This is what we've done over the last 30 years. That chronic fructose exposure alone, nothing else, causes this thing we call the metabolic syndrome. Everybody knows what the metabolic syndrome is? Okay, so this is the conglomerate of the following different phenomena: obesity, type 2 diabetes, lipid problems, hypertension, and cardiovascular disease. Okay, those all cluster together, okay, called metabolic syndrome. I'm going to show you how fructose does every one of those. All right, so now let's talk about a different carbohydrate. Let's talk about my favorite carbohydrate, maybe yours too. Okay? Ethanol. Ethanol is a carbohydrate, isn't it? Here's the structure. Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen. It's a carbohydrate. But we all know that ethanol is a toxin, right? A poison, right? You can wrap your Lamborghini around a tree, or you can fry your liver. Your choice. Depends on how much you drink and how often, right? Okay. So we know that ethanol is not good for you. Except, of course, a little bit is good for you, right? So we can talk about that, too, later if you want. Okay? But let's talk about how it's bad for you. So here's acute ethanol exposure. Okay? CNS depression, vasodilatation, hypothermia, tachycardia, myocardial depression, pupillary responses, respiratory depression, diuresis, hypoglycemia, loss of fine motor control. You all went to college. Here's fructose. Nothing. Doesn't do any of those because the brain doesn't metabolize fructose. Okay? Alcohol gets metabolized in the brain to cause all of those things, but fructose doesn't. Okay? So fructose is not an acute toxin. Ethanol is. We control ethanol, don't we? Okay? We have something called the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, right? We have all sorts of things. We tax ethanol. We do all sorts of things to limit consumption of ethanol. Okay? The Nordic countries, okay, all the liquor stores are state-run in an attempt to try to set the price of ethanol high enough so as to discourage consumption for public health reasons. We have 1,500 years of alcohol control policy in this world to draw on in terms of how to limit consumption. Got it? Okay? Because ethanol is a toxin and we know it. The ethanol comes in, passive diffusion, there's no receptor for it, no transporter. First thing that happens is ethanol gets converted to this guy over here called acetaldehyde. Okay? Anybody know anything about aldehydes? Like formaldehyde? Right? Are aldehydes good for you or bad for you? They're bad, right? Because what do? They can cause cancer. They cross-link proteins is what they do. Okay? So if you cross-link enough proteins in your liver, what do you think happens to it? You get something called cirrhosis. Right, exactly. All right? So this guy over here is bad. Okay? And it generates something called reactive oxygen species. And reactive oxygen species damage proteins in the liver. And the more alcohol you drink, the more of this stuff you get. So far, so good? Okay, so this is one of the reasons why alcohol is bad. Let's see what happens to the fructose. So, number one, the glucose, remember, because sucrose is half glucose, half fructose. So 60 of the calories of the 120 are glucose. 12 are going to make it into the liver, 48 out here for the rest of the body. Okay, the same 20-80 split we had before with glucose. So far, so good. But all 60 calories of fructose are going to be metabolized by the liver. Why? Because only the liver can metabolize fructose. So what do we call it where when you take in a compound that's foreign to your body and only the liver can metabolize it and in the process generates various problems, what do we call that? We call that a poison.